Hey everyone, hope you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak on either your Nintendo Switch or on PC, and of course upcoming to PlayStation and Xbox consoles. And today what I wanted to discuss was something that I've seen being brought up a little bit more and more in social media, and that is the so-called alleged desire sensor. So a lot of people kind of throughout the holidays have been playing the game a bit more, seemingly, and they are not necessarily getting the drops they want. And it reminded me of an article that I read a few months back where Capcom tried to introduce a patent for a brand new system measuring player behaviors and adjusting material drops rates accordingly. AKA, they were literally trying to make a desire sensor for Monster Hunter. Now, this was originally reported on by the 4Gamers Taiwan original website. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for that. And this was essentially set to drop for what was believed at the time the next mainline Monster Hunter game. Remember that back in 2019, I believe Iceborne had just recently released. I believe this information was found through the patent listings for that game, but of course that never became live. It was never like actually introduced into the game. So people assumed that whatever the next mainline game was, we didn't necessarily know Rise names at the time. We did know that there would be, of course, a next mainline game, like no differently now, but it was like kind of expected that that game could potentially have this system live. Of course, Rise came and went, didn't necessarily have it. Now we're playing Sunbreak, and of course, this game doesn't necessarily seem to have that. But a lot of people are still complaining regarding the desire sensor not necessarily being too welcoming to them and giving them the rewards that they want. So simply put, this was something that Capcom tried to introduce through a patent. So there's an official listing here in Korean where they kind of like go over all the information. There's two versions of it. There's a Japanese version, but there's a Korean version as well. Kind of going over the entire descriptions we're going to be talking about in just a second. And the second image showcases pretty much the implementation. So pretty much if a character is supposed to do this, or a reward is expected to do this, a hunter is hunting a specific monster to get a specific reward that they haven't necessarily gained because they tagged a piece of armor that they need a specific reward. Remember that you can tell like the game to tell you or remind you whenever you get a specific drop, so you can craft a specific armor set. Like you can pin specific armor pieces that you want to craft, so it tells you whenever you've collected all the items for that piece. It just kind of like pops into your like completed quest log information that it tells you that. So this is a system that would kind of be intertwined with that. You tell it which piece of armor you want to craft. Eventually, once you've collected all the items, or presumably as you're like farming that one item that you continually cannot get, whether it's mantles or crystals or whatever it is, eventually it reminds you of that. This would also imply that this desire sensor patent would have been one of those things that either helps you or hinders you, depending on how cynical you are as a player, to be able to kind of like pick up those extra drops that you want. They also showcase a little bit of like a hunter fighting a generic lizard monster type of thing. And then the desire sensor on the third image all the way in the bottom right, you kind of get to see it like from the drops that specific monster is going to have, kind of like sorting out which drops is going to give you before you even actually get to kill it. Whether you actually complete the hunt or not, it's just going to be preceded based on like how much of an intent there is on your side to be able to get a specific drop, which is both fascinating and extremely terrifying if you are like something of a mobile gamer. You already know that when it comes to gacha, this is just pretty much how that system is set up. There's a lot of just kind of like preceded stuff going on, and that same preceded system is something that we have already seen with like curious crafting, for example, or like charms, for example. If you're trying to like get like a specific charm, you've kind of already seen how precedes already work. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're looking for a very specific like 3 attack, 2 weakness exploit charm with 3/1/1 slots. You know, you're not ever going to come across that if the system has already been preceded when you logged in the first time. Remember that we used to have, I believe, in World, you could reset based on like how many you could log out and log back in, or like turn the system off and turn it back on. Something along those lines. It might have been Generations Ultimate. You can change the seedings based on doing that. And Rise, of course, you could just fast forward your spot in the settings, and Rise, you could do that in Sunbreak, but of course they patched it and now it's preset, so you can't do anything of that. So this system already kind of existed for like other things, but it doesn't necessarily exist for drops, presumably. But now we have this kind of like patent that was introduced a while back where Capcom was trying to implement it. We don't officially actually know if they ever did. which is the really scary and I guess fascinating thing alongside it. There's an interesting article from gamerbraves.com. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for that. They mentioned that in theory, this could have been used in a way to help players if they saw that they were farming a specific monster too many times. It could have been used to theoretically increase the drop rates for rare materials or reducing player frustrations. However, Monster Hunter players are infinitely cynical and would have no doubt blamed the desire sensor of their failures to get that Rathalos Ruby or even the multiple runs, since it apparently was also meant to detect exactly which items you needed and for that sweet greatsword upgrade, and keep it away from you if you kept playing the game for longer, or even worse, blame your friend for getting the material flawlessly as you are still kind of like hunting for it. They do specifically mention that in the report. It did mention that Capcom had filed this patent back in 2019, like I mentioned before, back when Iceborne originally came out for Monster Hunter World, and it meant the earliest we could have probably seen it was for base Monster Hunter Rise, although more realistically it would have been planned for Sunbreak, which of course Sunbreak is now live. We haven't necessarily seen any indication of this, but if you ask a lot of people who are still hunting a very specific like Almudron mantle, for example, or like magma Almudron mantles, it seems to be those are pretty rare to come by. Geismagorm as well, and this is another monster that I've seen a lot of people complain that Geismagorm doesn't necessarily love to drop very specific things for people, so it's interesting in that regard. They do mention that even though the patent had been filed, it does not mean that we can expect Malzeno to have fluctuating drop rates, patents, or ideas, not necessarily mechanics, that the patent can be filed but never implemented. So it is one of those things where, like, you know, it could have been just a thought that they wanted to have, and ultimately they just decided not to, you know, implement it in the game. But it is fascinating to think, and does remind me of like that entire idea of like, I believe PlayStation introduced a patent for the PlayStation 5 where it would tell them like if a player was struggling with a very specific quest, you could request another player, or like there would be like some sort of helpline. Like if you're like playing Bloodborne, for example, and you cannot necessarily handle a boss in Bloodborne, you can contact a helpline based on like your subscription, and you could get help on like how to take down that specific boss, which of course that implies a paid system for you to be able to get help through this hotline, which is just insane. The fact that you could probably look up a guide, or the fact that you could just watch a YouTube video and kind of mimic what that player already is doing, you know, it's already lost on people. Why don't I just pay a subscription so someone can tell me what to do? It's just fascinating the way that these companies think, and they want to implement technically things for you to be able to have more fun with the game at the cost of course, your wallet. So I certainly wanted to bring this up again. It did remind me that I've seen a lot of people complaining about, you know, the Sire sensor once again on social media, and it reminded me of these interesting articles that I read a while back just discussing this entire idea where Capcom tried to bring it into fruition, but it seems like they backed out altogether. Maybe the next game is going to introduce it once they go fully open world, free to play with season passes. Hopefully not. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.